welcome to the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David J. Mund, and I am joined by Emma Sheridan and Timber Sheridan. He's a big boy. That's all that I'll say. I won't comment on how big, and to the audio listeners, you get to make up in your mind just how big he is. I say we just get right into it, because I assume that many of you already know what you're here for, and if you're just randomly listening to this episode, what a doozy of a first episode to listen to. And again, may I just say to the first-time listeners, this is the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. This past weekend?
It was a week ago.
What is time?
I know, it was a week ago. My goodness.
Today's Saturday, so everything was just about to begin. Everything was already happening. Okay, whatever. Last weekend, Emma and I were hired to co-write and co-direct a 2-day immersive experience in Lenox, Massachusetts, about an hour outside of Boston, for Capital One cardholders and executives, starring Neil Patrick Harris and David Burtka, the Hollywood power couple. First of all, whoa. Yes, just on its at face value alone, that sentence is insane. But we figured, as a brief recap, and this will be a relatively shorter episode because there's of course a million things that we could talk about as like subtext. We could tell you all about the story. We could tell you all about how it came to be and what it was like every second of every day while we were there. But that took place over the course of a weekend as far as the event goes, and months as far as writing goes. So we just don't have the time to recap that. I think the more important thing is talking about our subjective experiences in the lead up to it, some of the like wild, sort of surreal parts of what it was like to do that in general. And then one of the things I always like to talk about is sort of the come down. So we'll talk about that. But this will probably be a shorter episode. Main thing, would you like to start by talking about how this gig even came to be in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So, huge shout out to Chris Waters from Constructed Adventures.
Link in description.
He is an absolute force of nature. His company focuses on creating adventures for people for all kinds of events. I assume team builders, birthday parties, just for fun, anything in between. And he does a lot of amazing race style work. He creates mini games for people, puzzles for people. He's got a whole team that he works with to build puzzles who also deserve a massive shout out.
He's got merch.
He's got merch.
I'm wearing it right now.
And on top of that, he's just a really nice, easy, down-to-earth guy to work with. So big shout out to him. But
again, Chris Waters of Constructed Adventures.
Yes, absolutely. Amazing human being. But he was working with David and I on a separate project, and in that process mentioned that there is another project coming up in November, which is the event we're about to talk about, and wanted to know if we would be on board for helping to write the story world.
I think I do still want to talk about that early process.
Sure.
In that, basically Emma and I were both at a period of our creative careers where not a lot of the big things that we had planned to do had either just happened or were not going to happen for a while. So what we decided is that on Wednesdays, we were going to start doing just creative sessions where it was like, it doesn't matter what this is for. It may ultimately end up being in service of like writing a film or making an immersive experience or whatever. We had just, and this is a little plug, we had just finished the music video for Peach Rings by Midwest Guys. If you have not heard it, please do so. Please check out the link in the description to listen to Peach Rings. Emma co-starred in the music video. So we knew that we worked together creatively just because of the other creative experiences that we had had in the past. But, and I'm going to maybe set up the initial thing and then you take it from there. In that, like, so through 2 of your past immersive experiences, there was a guest that had done Emma's immersive experiences who hired Chris. Is that how that worked out?
Yep. So she she had a birthday coming up and wanted to do something special for it. And in that process, I threw my name into the ring, having created stories that I know she's enjoyed in the past. And she also got connected with Chris. And so she hired Chris and I to work in tandem to create something really special for her this upcoming April, which we're still working on.
Mm-hmm. So Wednesdays kind of got taken over by talking about that particular gig. And then, out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, do you want to take that or should I?
Sure, yeah. So Chris, who we were already working with on this other project, pitched for us to join him as writers for the story world for the immersive experience with Neil Patrick Harris and Capital One. Mm-hmm. And we, of course, were very, very much on board. That's our favorite thing to do, is to write and create stories, right? And so we knew it was going to be a tighter timeline than this other project.
Yes.
We had a couple of
the timeline was, that this other experience that we're still working on was to take place in April. And so we had all that time between when we found out about that and still April to get that done. This one was like, hey, this thing's coming up in November. Time to pivot real fast and work on this.
And we were game. We were like, okay. Absolutely. And for the next couple of months, we got no sleep.
No sleep.
Not even a little bit of sleep. And Wednesdays became quite a bit more than Wednesdays. I mean, we were putting in hours and hours and hours, pretty much any day of the week we could find. And if we weren't together in the same space, we were on phone calls, we were on Zoom calls, just trying to work out this world. I mean, we were creating a whole world from the ground up, which was really exciting. And I would do it again in a heartbeat and hope to do it again in the near future. But it was a journey.
To maybe bounce around in the timeline just a little bit, and this is just speaking of my own subjective experience, I came to learn that, like, you know, I've had months, maybe years, where I have nothing, and maybe this is a small view of this, but where I have nothing going on creatively, or I have not created things for myself to do. When all of a sudden you go from not having a whole lot to one of the biggest creative experiences of your life, you start to see very easily or very quickly how doing what you love can still exhaust you.
Yeah.
And again, I wouldn't have it any other way. This was an amazing experience, and I would do it all over again starting tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But
I think a lot of that exhaustion comes from the pressure of it all.
Yes.
Because you care so much, and you as a general term, like I'm speaking about myself as well. You care so much that the philosophy becomes, I am just going to burn the candle at both ends until there's nothing left to give, because and this is now just speaking about me as a person, one of my biggest fears in life is fearing having regrets. And the last thing I wanted was to get to the end of this event regretting how I could have done more or could have spent more time writing. And a big lesson I've had to learn is sometimes the most productive thing to do is to sleep and to rest.
Let's touch on that real briefly.
Okay.
We've already kind of set up that these were many, many sleepless nights.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you'll have a different view of this and you'll be gracious in the way that I handle it. But also, I have a firm cutoff sometimes because I do value sleep so much. Because I know that if I am underslept, which is still fine to be, but if I am consistently underslept, not only does my input become not as valuable because it's not as constructive, but also, like, I lose the ability to have input and I just phase into delirium. So a big part of this for me was, like, I don't know if I would use the word boundary setting, but something along the lines of boundary setting, in that, like, this was the most pressure I've ever felt to deliver on a creative experience, and I must get a decent amount of sleep. Mm-hmm. And may I say, 3 months later, I'm very proud of the way that you eventually shifted into valuing sleep. Because Emma's approach to this initially was like, not sleep is for the weak, but something close to that.
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Exactly. And she's a powerhouse, and the amount of hours she put in awake, continuing to work on this experience as I was sleeping, got us to where we were, and I'm grateful for the time that you put into this, but also you still deserve sleep.
Thank you. I'm getting it now.
You're getting it now. And I'm proud of you for that. But anyways, so that gig was pitched, and immediately the starting gun was like, okay, time to deliver. Not just because, look, you should always, I think it's a Ron, can't remember his last name, but the character Ron in Parks and Rec, the quote is, you can't half-ass two things, you have to whole-ass one thing. And so from the starting gun, this was like, it's time to whole-ass this whole project. Because A, we should deliver on all projects. All projects should be treated with the same amount of care and intention. But, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, recognizing that this was not only the biggest experience, biggest creative opportunity of my life, but this was just like, this, you never know what gig could snowball into another cool opportunity. You never know where the butterfly effect may take place. I did not know when you and I started doing the same type of creative work 2.5 years ago that it may eventually turn into writing and directing an experience for, dare I say it, one of Hollywood's biggest actors. You know, you never know.
And I do want to pause really quick and clarify that when we say direct, we purely mean the theatrical part.
Yes.
Chris Waters directed the vast majority of the weekend when it came to interactive elements. And so I do want to make sure that we are properly giving him credit, as was, there was, team there working on the meals, team there working on the hospitality of it all. So we were a small cog in a much larger machine. So when we use the word direct, we do just mean the theatrical elements.
Correct. And as I talk about that, can you move that just a little bit closer to your face?
Yes.
Pointing towards your mouth. Yes, there's a whole team and a whole cast and crew that I do want to intentionally shout out shortly. So we are going to do that. But yes, it wasn't that like Emma and I were thank you for saying that Emma and I were not like in charge of the weekend. We were not the Quentin Tarantinos of the weekend, but we knew, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you and I knew the story the most.
Yes.
We were the most intimately involved with the universe of which we were giving these people, the cast and crew, to then thrive in, which they then took their own responsibilities in making it the experience that it was. So everybody involved in this is a equal player in this. But when it came to the story, we were deferred to on some of the, like, how does this work as far as the lore goes, like in the universe. Yes. So yes, co-writing and co-directing only means in the way that the story unfolds, not the way that information was shared and disseminated via puzzles, mini games, that type of thing. But yeah, just strictly story, which at this point, we're not going to like really touch on some of the like, actually I will say, if you want the story spoiled for you, the overview of the experience was published in People magazine. That link is in the description as well. So the story, the whodunit of it all is going to be told in that article if you decide that you want to read it. If you want to read it, go ahead, that's fine. But I will say sort of the brief overview of the story was, and I think maybe it's important to reiterate this as well, we were told that this experience was not only going to be, like we said, for Capital One cardholders and executives, starring David Burtka and Neil Patrick Harris, but also in service of featuring food created by herself and the team of Michelin chef Dominique Crenn.
Right. So when people went and bought a ticket to this event, it was being advertised as a weekend with Neil Patrick Harris and David Burtka, with food provided by Chef Dominique Crenn.
Right.
And really, a good humbling check on us is that the story was, I mean, part of the appeal, but kind of way down there on the list of things people would be excited to be there for.
And again, I think many times here, I'm just, if I may, because this is, this is our episode here, but if this is David Mund's podcast, I'll speak subjectively of my own experience. I think it's pretty obvious if I were to sign up for that thing, like, I'm probably there for Neil Patrick Harris, because how cool is that? But it wasn't just billed as that. It was so much more than an experience with Neil Patrick Harris. We did this at a place called Canyon Ranch, which again, we could talk endlessly about how incredible of a space that is.
And their staff is phenomenal as well. Could not be more supportive.
Like, I don't know. I don't know if it's good or bad that I was surprised by this, but I was so surprised by how attentive they were, how compassionate and how patient they were with us throughout this whole thing. Like, that was a really good staff.
Could not have asked for a better, again, everybody, every moving part in the team could not have been better people.
Yes. So just to quickly touch on how the story came to be, again, you can look out on People magazine to have the story told for you. But knowing that this was about the food and the experience, we did a little bit of research. We started by watching the adjacent to horror, but mostly thriller, right? Film.
I call it thriller.
The Menu, which...
Because we were told that they wanted something in tone a little bit grittier, a little bit darker, more serious drama.
Yes.
This wasn't meant to be a comedy.
Right.
And they also, like David mentioned, wanted to feature the food pretty heavily.
Yes.
And so immediately the film, The Menu, which is a great film, came to mind.
Yeah. Now that we've done this experience, I would like to actually go back and rewatch it, because I was kind of watching this as like a definitely inspiration, but also like, just inspiration. Now I'd like to go back and watch it just because it was a great movie.
For fun. It was good.
The brief pitch on that is basically people go to this, I think we described it as the one percenters, a handful of one percenters go to this private remote island to have the unique once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have food cooked for them by a world-renowned chef. And then it all goes wrong, was the main theme of the film, The Menu. No spoilers on that. Sure, People magazine wrote an article about that as well. But we use that as motivation to write a story about a celebrity chef named Sebastian Sinclair. Think Gordon Ramsay. I keep forgetting that guy's name. The dude who traveled.
We looked this up so many times.
Oh, it's going to kill me. I'm going to spend maybe 10 seconds umming and ahhing while I try to find his name.
Think about a BoJack Horseman-ified Gordon Ramsay.
Yes.
There was just a lot of tragedy in his character, a lot of which wasn't his fault, but he still ended up involved in some pretty shady dealings.
Yes. So basically, and we'll work backwards here to talk about this a little bit, but what we knew, and we're going to talk on a theme that I don't know if we came up with, but that we used to refer back to over and over again, that it was us versus the story, and we were finding the story along the way, but we were working backwards. So what we knew is that we were going to give an experience to guests that began with, when they arrive, they know that they are at the memorial/charity auction for the deceased celebrity chef, Sebastian Sinclair, who you have come to learn has passed away tragically in a fire in his restaurant. This is a chef whose star was fading, whose career was dwindling. And throughout the experience, you get to meet many of the people in Sebastian's life.
It was a big process of trying to create a world in which he had secrets to be discovered.
Correct.
It's a peeling back of the layers of this facade that he had shown to the world.
Right.
And that was the tough part, is creating characters that were a couple of layers deep.
Right. And the peeling back of layers, I think, was one of the biggest, I'll use the word both joys and challenges of creating this story to begin with.
Absolutely.
Because we started there. We knew this is the story of Sebastian Sinclair. Now let's work backwards to reveal some of the inner workings of his life, peel back the layers to discover some secrets he might have been hiding. So for weeks, months, we would kind of in real time learn things about this fictional character, Sebastian Sinclair, that had obviously yet to have been discovered, because this is a story that we were making from scratch, but also like something manifest, like this story already existed in the ether somewhere, and we were slowly putting it together by plucking these ideas out of the air that told the story that we had yet to learn. I'm not saying that as constructively as I want to say.
Well, it was beautiful to watch it come alive in front of us.
Right. The universe presented us with the ideas. We were just antennas for the signal that was already out in the ether. Right?
I will say it is a very humble experience working in collaboration with so many people.
Touch on that.
There's layers to that, right? Because it was you and I for so long working on the initial pitch, and then working on the characters, and then working on the broader arc of what happened with Sebastian in his life and in his relationships with other people. And then there were times that you and I wouldn't fully agree on an idea, which I don't know if you want to introduce this phrase that we would often use.
You're saying us against the story? Yeah.
Story.
So a part of collaboration is humbling yourself and checking yourself. And now I'm speaking for me here, but I'm kind of speaking for both of us in that, like, every once in a while, I would have an idea, or Emma would have an idea, where the other person kindly, gently, but firmly would say, I don't think that's it. Go ahead.
That was so refreshing, though. It was really refreshing to be able to say, I don't like that idea, or I don't like that idea because it's so exhausting to have to, well, I actually think maybe it would be better if maybe we did this, but only if you're okay with it. Like, knowing that it wasn't personal was so, because it was us just wanting to tell a really good story, and it made the process so much easier when we could just be honest with one another.
And that is when one person, quote unquote, wins that argument. Not an argument, but for lack of a better word, argument. There was also times when it was 50-50, where we kind of couldn't come to a firm conclusion, which means that it feels like both of us might be right. And so the other person would often go, I guess I'll just defer to you. Like, if you feel strongly about this, go ahead. I don't feel strongly about this, so we'll work from there.
And that was another good thing, is being able to, as creators, know not everything is a mountain I need to die on. So if the other person feels like it is, then cool.
Right.
There doesn't need to be a...
Do we want the one example that we keep laughing about?
Yeah, sure.
So well, I'll say first how it did happen. You come to learn, again, I think I said this already, that Sebastian Sinclair tragically died in a fire in his restaurant. Or at least that's what we tell people. He.
Right, it's or did he.
Or did he, right. Moment. One of the first things was finding out how he died in general. And I'll let you run to that.
I was so dead set for so long on having him die in a private plane crash gone wrong.
Right.
Because then that could have easily been an accident, and that's why everything would have gone on all hunky-dory with his estate auction, and then maybe the plane was sabotaged. And so I was so excited about this idea for so long.
You saying that, I remember maybe for weeks, we maybe started with that. Like,
we developed the characters with that being the plot.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were talking about potential ways that, like, the fuselage could have been sabotaged, or the piloting mechanisms could have been tampered with.
We did research.
Yeah, we did
research.
Which I think one of the biggest us versus the story things was a humble checking in of, it creates too much complexity in trying to explain how that could have happened, because that feels more heisty, feels more Ocean's 11-y than what could be a simple explanation for a potential death that then could have shady backings. Like, if he died in a fire, maybe he didn't die in a fire, he was just found in a fire. Rather than, now you have to find fragments of the plane. Now you have to dig up the black box from the plane. And it was a good idea for the film that could be.
Or a novel.
But for an immersive experience for guests who may have been doing this for like the first time ever, it was a little too complex for what we were tasked with doing.
Chris Waters, again, cannot shout him out enough, has a phrase he comes back to about when all is said and done, elegant simplicity wins out.
Yep.
And so, I think that was it was a good check. I still love for another iteration of this to include the silly plane crash, but you were correct. And that was also a running theme, is anytime one of us had feedback for one another or someone else on the team had feedback, oftentimes it led to a better story when we were able to take that feedback and run with it.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a punk house, it's a punk home. You can find this banner and others like it, as well as this silly goose on the loose hat, these etched mirrors, these custom charm bracelets, and so much more by heading to Cat and Crew, that's KATANDCREW.com, and entering the promo code MONDAY, that's MUNDAY, for 10% off your first purchase. Katie and Andrew, one of the first supporters of this show, have made a 10% discount available for ADH.Deep-Dive listeners. See store for details, of course, but they've got so many cool punk home products, decor. You don't have to be a punk. That's okay. That's all right. Tattoos for your home, koozies, wall banners. On its way, soon to be released, a hot sauce. Oh my God, keep your eyes peeled for that. So again, if you want this is not a punk house, this is a punk home banner. If you want this silly goose on a loose hat, if you want etched mirrors, if you want custom charm bracelets, so much more, go to Cat and Crew, KATANDCREW.com, enter the promo code MONDAY, that's MUNDAY, for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you very much to Katie and Andrew for sponsoring the show. Let's get back to the podcast. So, I think that's probably as much as we need to touch on in like the development of the story. I think one of the biggest things along the way, like a theme that I would want to continue to touch on here, is the us versus the story thing. Is that like, as a person, and I'm just speaking subjectively here, many times in my creative career, it's been me versus me. Where it's like, I write this thing, I shoot this thing, I act in this thing, I direct this thing, I edit this thing, I put this thing out, I put my name on it. And the only feedback I have is post-release feedback. It's the comments, right? And sometimes the comments hurt my feelings. And so this was more of a humbling experience of being, let's say, checked in real time and dealing with that and getting over that. And there were many times where that was not the case. I don't know if I would use the word offended, but close. And even if I were offended by some of the constructive criticism I was getting, it's more of like great, you can be offended, that's fine. Now move on, because we don't have time for this.
Right. We still have a story to tell. The event's going to happen no matter what.
Right. And so I guess I just briefly wanted to touch on that, in that, like, for me, this was a learning experience in creative collaboration, which is something I've always wanted to do, but don't often get the opportunity to do. So to do it on the most grand of scales was like a reality check, in that, like, my ego is not the pilot here. It is just a passenger. The story is the pilot, and that is the most important thing. It's time to defer to what is best for the story.
Right. And even sometimes things that we thought were best for the story weren't what we ended up going with because of feedback that we received from other members of the team, which I think that was a really important lesson, was learning to hold things loosely, to pour ourselves into what we were creating, to do the absolute best we could, to put our whole heart and soul into it, and then send it away and hold it loosely and pivot. And also to be so clear, even if it was changes we made were what we thought might not be what's best for the story, it ended up being what was best for the story, because sometimes people know things or have insights or perspective that we don't have, and it did end up being very, very good to trust what the team had to say
Right.
about ideas.
Before I talk about what it was like to arrive, you want to talk on that phrase?
Oh my God, yeah, I do. So this, I think, is probably more relevant to what it felt like being on site, which if I'm stepping on your toes at all or queuing up things that you were planning to talk about in a different way, let me know. But arriving on site and doing that first table read with the actors, blocking
maybe it is.
things out with the actors was, I mean, incredibly scary. If you want to talk about it first, we can come back to that.
Well, we'll just tee up a phrase that you brought to my attention, which just go ahead and say the phrase.
Yeah, something I'm working really hard on in my life right now is this idea of doing it scared.
Yeah.
So there's going to be so many things in life, whether it's personally or professionally or creatively, that you're just going to be scared shitless of.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, at least speaking for myself, I really want to be a person who does it scared anyway.
Right. And I think a big part of this, and if you do listen to this podcast often, a theme that I come back to just about every episode is imposter syndrome. This was imposter syndrome on steroids. And again, and yet, the story still needed to happen. The experience was still going to happen. I couldn't back away because I didn't feel like I was equipped or that I was prepared or that I was the right guy for the job or whatever. The job was happening. It was coming up. And I needed to do it, even though I was terrified. Mm-hmm. I say I, but we, anybody in that particular position. So let's quickly talk on arriving. So we flew out of Grand Rapids into New York, had a little layover there, got some food, then flew from LaGuardia over to Albany, spent the final night in Albany putting like final touches on like the last few things that we were going to do before we met everybody on site. Because aside from like some Zoom calls, we had not met anybody physically face to face, which how well can you know somebody until you actually meet them? Like face to face. And so we were just putting like final touches on that. And then the next morning, so this would have been Thursday morning, we drove.
Thursday morning.
Yep, we drove from Albany to Lenox, Massachusetts, and got to Canyon Ranch, which in the edit here, I'm going to show visuals of. Hopefully I've already been showing visuals along the way here. Just quickly touch on how majestic of a place that was. What a wild place to have been. That, again, as a small town boy with, pennies in my account, not an experience I would have imagined that I would have if not for being a part of this really cool creative experience.
It was giving like cute, quaint New England vibes, but then the town of Lenox was, and then Canyon Ranch is take those quaint New England small town vibes and just make it these really beautiful,
grand
buildings.
Whatever. It is a quote unquote hotel. But it was also a resort. Yeah. Okay, that's the better word for it. Yeah, it was a resort. I'm just saying that just to talk about how beautiful that place was. It was a really cool spot. So we get there, we immediately start getting to work. We meet Chris for the first time. Again, Chris Waters of Constructed Adventures. Want to make sure we shout him out as many times as we possibly can. And then we start kind of working on what he would call the gambits, which is like some of the experiences that the
puzzles, the mini games, the interactive elements. His team were really the powerhouses in spearheading that.
Yep. So a lot of Thursday was in preparation for what those experiences would be like. Excuse me, for the actors and for the crew. But then Thursday night, we meet all the actors. Thursday afternoon.
That was Thursday night. Yep, it sure was.
Because they all left, I think it was probably around 3. And because then they all left for dinner after that.
But we had our first table read.
Yeah, we had our first table read. Which for the first time, we were hearing someone else speak the words that we wrote for a script. Because basically the way, should I talk about sort of the format here? In that, like, what they did Friday and then what they did Saturday?
I don't know that it's particularly...
Okay. Well, the main thing is there was a script written for what I guess would consider the finale of Saturday night's event. The whole thing was Friday, Saturday, the immersive experience. And then a physical, like, word-for-word script was written for Saturday night. And that was sort of the, like... well, whatever, I'll just move on from that. The main thing is there was a script, and we were to do a table read with all the actors. Up until that point, Emma and I had been workshopping this script to get it right, to then pitch to, which I do want to quickly talk about that, you know, and again, we're going to shout out the cast and crew just a little bit, but these were all capable, competent, talented, experienced theater and improv actors.
And film.
Yes. Main thing was I just wanted to touch on that improv part, because a lot of what we knew going into that is that, like, the most important thing to us is that everyone knew the story, knew the life and lore of Sebastian Sinclair, and then that for this script, I do kind of want to talk about the beats part. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that, like, when the eventual occasion came for them to read this script, we had no expectations that everyone was going to know word for word everything that we had written. The most important thing is we do a couple of table reads so you know what the script is, and then if it feels like you particularly do not speak that way, we give you, the professional actor, the freedom and space to say it in a way that feels more natural and comfortable to you. But doing this table read was our first experience hearing the actors speak words that we wrote down.
That we spent months and months slaving over.
Yeah.
It was very surreal.
Surreal is the main word I wanted to touch on there. That, like, that was my first glimpse of, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like, us sitting at the end of the table while 8 to 10, I can't remember the exact number, very capable, very talented actors read the script. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry if I'm just hovering on this point here, but, like, that felt like the first we're really doing it moment.
And we're scared, but we're still doing it.
And then yes, go ahead and talk there then.
Yeah, and so it's there's so much I want to come back to the actors making it their own in just a minute there. Mm-hmm. So if I stray away, please remind me. But yeah, it's hard to try to figure out what the fear is, right? I think there's an element of fear of the actors aren't going to enjoy it or have a good time
Imposter
or
syndrome.
Feel invested in it. I think there's an element of fearing that, like, the guests aren't going to enjoy it or have a good time. And I think it comes down to, there's a fear that all the time and energy and effort we put into it would ultimately still have created something that was not good enough, whatever that means. And so something that was really beautiful in helping to dampen some of that fear over the course of the weekend was watching as the actors, who were so phenomenal. I completely love and adore and respect each and every one of them, but seeing how they not only took the script and you know, story world and immersed themselves in it to help immerse the guests, but also took their characters and so fully and completely made them their own.
Became those characters in the way that, like, we could have only imagined.
It was really, really cool to watch, because that is in and of itself an act of co-creation, right? Mm-hmm. We created a thing and they met us there and then said, we're going to create with you in this moment. Mm-hmm. And that's such a beautiful exercise as somebody who creates. There's nothing else like it.
And also, maybe this is just in service of this point you're making, this word validation comes to mind here, in that, like, you know, we're doing it scared. But then suddenly, once you see these talented people taking these elements of art that we have created and making it as good as we could have possibly imagined, suddenly I feel validated as a creator, where in lead up to this event, and I'm just speaking for myself here, imposter syndrome dominates my life. Even if I'm working with a small mom and pop shop or a wedding couple or whatever, I have the same feeling for the smallest gigs as I do for the biggest gigs, in that they're going to find out soon that I'm a fraud. And that's all mental health. This is me. This is my subjective view of myself, and things that need to be ironed out in therapy, I'm sure. But once it works, once it finally happens and I see that this is like, I felt very proud in that moment in a way that I didn't think was possible up until that moment, that like, I'm good, we're capable, we are talented. And, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, another part of that, though, is even when things weren't as good as we would have wanted them to have been, is a big lesson for me, was having to accept a sense of peace around we did the absolute best we
Correct.
could, given the circumstances, given the parameters, given the timeline, given our own resources and abilities. And given all of that, I was very proud. And of course, you know, had there been more time, or had we both been able to give more of ourselves to the project, had we not had to have slept, then there would have been things that I would have loved to have changed, and that were lessons for next time. But I think a huge point of character growth for me is being at peace, knowing we did everything we could and people had a good experience and had a good time, and that's something to be really proud of.
But also something that, well, yes, definitely, but also something that I think helped us kind of do a reality check here is that, and if you're a creative, you probably know, something will always go wrong.
Always.
Something will not happen in the way that you anticipated. It's not, of course you try to prevent those things from happening. So being prepared, being equipped, being confident is a big part of that. But also it's what you do in those moments that really define, that really show you who you are.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in the past that people do make is saying this has to be perfect, or this will be perfect, so that when something does go wrong, there's a sort of like frantic response. So being prepared for something to, what is it? Hope for the best, expect the worst.
Sure.
Right? The truth is somewhere in the middle. And surrounding yourself with capable, talented, competent people means that less things are probably going to go wrong than my imposter syndrome would lead me to believe. However, when they do go wrong, that's okay. It is not necessarily a commentary on who I am as a creator, who I am as an artist, or who I am as a person. It is all about what you do with it. And again, I feel very validated in that when things did go, and I won't even say things went wrong.
Just unexpected.
When unexpected things happened, we responded really well. I want to give us credit for that, because again,
Everyone did. Everybody was ready to jump in and support however they could.
Right. A lot felt on the line here. And again, maybe I'm just speaking subjectively. It felt like a lot was on the line because of the nature of how unique of an experience this was in my own creative career. But the way that we all handled it when things did go not exactly as we expected occasionally, it made me feel more equipped to handle bigger things to maybe go wrong in the future. And that just feels good as a creator.
Yeah. I think a lot of that also came back to we had worked so hard to internalize that us against the problem mentality.
Exactly.
And it felt that way for the whole team. It was the team against any unexpected challenges that might arise.
Yeah.
Not any one person against another person, because how dare this thing go wrong and that means that you're personally incompetent. It never felt that way. Right.
One of the ways that the timeline worked out here, because of course, as we've mentioned, he's one of the biggest actors in the world, is that Neil wasn't going to arrive until Saturday morning. So there were some gameplay, story-related things that happened Friday evening, and then all of Saturday, Neil was going to be a part of that unfolding of the story. So I just remember, and I am gonna, of course, chime in with your opinions and your thoughts here, but I'm gonna speak for myself here when saying that, while obviously recognizing that the people in front of me reading these words that we had so meticulously written and worked so hard to create this universe, and watching them thrive and make them those characters themselves. One of the biggest things I was nervous for is the second Neil becomes a part of this thing. And again, I'm just speaking for myself here in saying that I recognize it is very unlikely that Neil Patrick Harris is listening to this podcast. But if you are, Neil, you know, being starstruck is a real thing. And I've had occasional experiences with, dare I say it, celebrities that have all proven to me that, like, you know, celebrities are people too. They're just like you and me. They have their own fears and thoughts and ambitions and dreams and goals and worries. But I was just waiting for that moment to meet him, to be like, okay, how, again, maybe doing it scared. How do I handle meeting someone of that caliber who I, you know, revere? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Respect.
That I respect. And so the next morning, call time is at 8. Emma and I get 8 a.m. Emma and I get there about 7:30. Most of the actors are already down there. A few of us are having our coffee. We're sitting around the table. Emma and I are talking as if we're talking right now. And I remember it specifically being, we were looking to the left. But for the sake of this story, the camera is the door that leads into the green room. Emma and I are talking. We're saying, okay, so when this thing happens, we're going to do this. And then I want to make a little critique here. And then I want to change here. And then I clock over out of the corner of my eye. Neil is walking in. And I remember looking at Emma and I go, Neil's here. Here we go.
Yep.
Here we go. And may I just say, before I talk about any of the starstruck of it all, the first thing he did was introduce himself to us, come up, give us a hug, treat us like equals. And that immediately put me at ease that we were right where we were supposed to be in that moment. That we were, from the second he walked in the door, he treated us like professionals. He trusted our input. Of course, there were, like, as we've discussed, there's like commentary and constructive criticism and feedback.
He had
and like,
excellent feedback.
He had feedback that made this experience better. So any specific feedback I talk about going forward is not like, yeah, and then Neil made me change my mind. And everything he said was necessary feedback, and I appreciate him for that.
And correct.
And correct. But there was a moment in there was a universe in my mind where insert X celebrity here that I meet and work with goes, I've done this a time or two. I don't need your opinion here. Like, you need to trust me on this. Never once did I feel that way. And again, in the unlikely scenario that Neil Patrick Harris is listening right now, and may I just say, his husband, an equally talented individual, David Burtka.
Gosh, David is a delight. Yeah.
Listen, I do also want to say, nobody necessarily deserves special, particular individual shouts out here. We're going to shout out all of the cast and crew because they're all capable and talented.
If we could, I think the reverse is true. They all deserve individual
Sorry,
shouts. Yes.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I meant that, like, I'm just saying that everyone was talented, and I really appreciated working with them, and like, yeah, I'm in awe of their talent and capabilities. And again, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here. Having only known going into this experience 2 names, that being Neil Patrick Harris and David Burtka, David was there the whole time. I loved the way that he played that character that we had written, and he equally in that same way, while feeling starstruck around him, never once made me feel like I was just some small town dude who had never done this kind of thing. Everyone equally made us feel like we belonged there. Some even like seeked validation of our creative opinions, and that felt, you know, not necessarily that like, please tell me I'm doing a good job, but they deferred to us and asked questions about how this type of thing goes. And I'm saying that all to say that, like, yeah, I felt like we belonged there, and they appreciated and respected that. And
It was a team effort.
it was a team effort. And again, there was a universe in which any insert celebrity name here sees me for what I really am, inexperienced or whatever. I could say all these terrible things about myself as a creator. I'm just saying they never made me feel that way. Neil and David among them, you know? And from the second that Neil sat down and then we did another table read, again, there was just a heightening of the, oh my God, they're reading our... Neil Patrick Harris is speaking some of the words that I wrote for his character, and he seems to be enjoying it. Like, I don't want to fawn on the starstruck of it all, because again, I do want to reiterate that most of... Whatever, I don't want to dig a hole here. I'm just saying, celebrities are people too. Human beings, all... I'm digging a hole. What am I trying to say here? Can you help me? Save me. Rescue me.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
I think it was a very cool moment to watch very competent, capable individuals take our work and add their own flair to it and create a beautiful world for guests to play in.
Mm-hmm. And seem like they were enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't necessarily want to speak out of turn, but like, and maybe I'm cycling way ahead now, but there was like a post-show powwow that we all had down in the green room after everything was done. And one of my favorite moments of this entire experience was you and I sitting in the corner, just kind of sitting back, watching them all talk about how much fun they had.
That was really special.
And it was like, this group of talented individuals who have definitely done way more in the world of art, film, television, theater, so on and so forth, that I desperately want to be involved in. Watching these people who have done more, it felt like a mom and dad sitting back watching their kids talk about how much fun they had. And like, that I think was the most surreal part when it was all said and done, is like talking with them and like, you know, receiving our flowers from, some of the most talented people I've ever met. And while I still will be burdened by the weight of imposter syndrome for likely the rest of my life, in that moment, it was like, oh, you guys, thanks. Like, do you want to talk about that at all? Sorry, I'm stepping on your toes here a little bit.
Sure. I feel very thankful that everybody was supportive, I think is mostly what I took away
supportive.
From that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that they were supportive in that everybody just wanted to see it succeed. And so they took their characters, they made them their own. They took the script and my goodness, they brought it home. I mean, it was really phenomenal. Everybody just gave amazing performances. And then they were, like you said, they were kind and respectful to us as individuals. And that just felt really good. That felt really validating.
So, between now and then, if there's anything that you would like to interject, please feel free to do.
Can I see our notes?
I mean, that was all the notes that I had made. But like, do you want to start giving some shout outs? Talk about the cast and crew?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to specifically pull up, and maybe I'm just talking just to fill the time between me opening up my phone and finding the particular Google Doc sheet that I'm looking for. I just want to make sure we're not missing any names here. We had a handful of actors play a handful of roles, and then outside of the actors, there was, of course, Chris's team and some of the people at Canyon Ranch that were integral to the unfolding of this event. So, like, it was much more than just the actors here that helped this story come to life. Where the hell is this Google Doc sheet? I'm looking for the cast sheet. Do you know what I'm looking for?
The character sheet?
Yes. Sorry, pause here. maybe this is where a Cat and Crew ad comes in. Please hold, ladies and gentlemen. Where are the... oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so I'll just say the name of the character, a brief description of their relation to Sebastian Sinclair and who played them.
I don't even know if we need to do the relation to Sinclair. We can if you want to.
Well, I just have the one line.
Oh,
here.
that's fine. Yeah, for sure.
So, food critic Colton Sterling, played by Neil Patrick Harris. Obviously, what else can we say other than it's freaking Neil Patrick Harris, dude? It was Neil Patrick Harris.
So Colton Sterling as a character is meant to be insufferable in a way that it's funny how much guests enjoy being poked fun at.
Weird masochistic thing that we all apparently have deep within us.
Yeah, but I mean Neil just played it so perfectly, delightfully insufferable.
Yeah.
I would just it was really, really fun seeing that character come to life in a way that it was, again, spot on.
Yeah.
Could not have been better.
Sorry, I'm now sitting on my knees here so I can look at the battery on the camera here, because if at any point we have to cut here, I want to make sure that I do that. So now the symmetry of this shot has gone out the window, but so be it. Then we have Gustavo Bassett, who is a primetime celebrity cooking show host, played by Neil Patrick Harris' husband, and independently successful and famous David Burtka. I already said the brief little shout out to him.
Yeah.
I loved the way that he played that character.
He played it so over the top in a way that we couldn't have necessarily predicted but loved. And there's a scene at the very end of the show where the character has become pretty drunk, and hearing him read the lines out loud for the first time and having them mirror exactly the way we had so desperately hoped and prayed that they would be brought to life was amazing, and then some.
Yes.
And he made some really fun character choices,
Yes.
Adding to the canon of the character that were fun. So thank you.
The general manager of Sebastian Sinclair's restaurants, Margot Wellington, was played by Becky. I want to make sure I say it correctly because she goes by, I think, both last names. Becky Lithgow.
I believe so.
Becky, find it on Instagram, Becky B. Lithgow. I think the way that I was reading that was Blythe Lithgow, so I want to make sure that I actually get it right. But anyways, Becky Lithgow, amazingly talented. I think it's very important just to say up front so that I don't necessarily fawn on everybody's individual characteristics. Again, these were all very talented, capable, creative, competent people. They were all very good at what they did.
And Becky is one of those people that she just so very clearly wanted to play,
Yes.
wanted to be there, made everybody feel so immediately. It's like you've known her a million years,
Yes,
right?
yes. Then we had Heather Prescott, who was Sebastian Sinclair's social media manager, played by Victoria Bartolotta. Victoria
is a fearless star.
No
she
question.
She is fantastic and never broke character, not one single time. There was a moment where I thought I was going to have to rely on her for a contingency plan for something, and she was so ready to hop in. Incredible.
Then we had Judah Davidson, who was a local reporter, played by John Rogers, who was the only person between the beginning of the creation and those days leading up to the event that we had actually spoken to directly a couple of times.
John's fantastic. John just all around talented. Was doing a lot on the logistics end as well. Really.
And may I just say personally, again, everyone validated sort of that creative fear that I had going into that, but there was just something along the way that John had said directly to us that made me feel like we were really good at what we did. And that was sort of the initial glimpse of these people really trust us here. And I really feel valued here. It's not necessarily important to go into the specifics of what he said. I really appreciate something that he had said. Then we had Annie Sherman, who was the apprentice chef / sous chef at Sebastian Sinclair's restaurants, played by Emma Bates. Again,
Emma delivered an incredible performance. She brought some real emotion to her performance. That was fantastic. She was a very powerful performer, which I
also
appreciated
showed
a lot.
up ready to go with a what's the like a chef's apron.
Jacket.
Yeah. That was a really cool character choice that she was like ready to go with.
It was fantastic.
Then we've got Vincent Stone, who was Sebastian Sinclair's lawyer, played by William Pop. Pop?
Yes.
Okay, but I think the Instagram was Plop. That's why.
I don't think that's accurate. Let me look.
All right, quick hedging the story here just to make sure. Either way, the way that he played...
It's Pop.
It's Pop. Okay, so
Yes.
William Pop. Initially written, and again, not specific to talk about the characters here, but initially written to kind of be this like...
Think like Saul Goodman.
Saul Goodman-esque, but a little bit more firm, direct... Stoic, that's the word I'm looking for. And man, couldn't have had a better guy play that role.
And you could tell he cared a lot about
Yes.
embodying the character, which we
Yes.
appreciated.
Yes.
I really was going above and beyond to work on blocking for some things. Appreciated that quite a bit.
Now here's something that I do, just to be clear, she is much more than what I'm about to describe her to be. But if you are familiar with the magician duo, Penn and Teller, Penn Jillette is married to a woman named Emily Gillette, who was a part of this cast as our plant, which all you really need to know about the plant here is knowing that, like, they make everyone as a guest believe that they are also a guest to help disseminate information, to help maybe, like, guide them a little bit, to, like, ask the right questions, and then be involved in the story in a way that I don't think is necessary to describe here in this particular explanation. But anyways, I do need to say, personally, I had such a really beautiful, special one-on-one with her, like towards the end of this event. And again, it's just one of those experiences that made me feel like seen, appreciated, valued, respected. I just loved her. She was such a bright light that weekend.
Emily was endlessly committed and also like contagiously enthusiastic.
Yeah, enthusiastic
Yeah.
in a way that, like, you could tell she was genuinely so, like, I don't know if I'll use the word honored, but, like, she so badly wanted to be a part of that and like made sure we knew the whole way how excited she was to be there. And I just loved her. She was so great. Then we have Diana Meadows, which was Chef Sinclair's ex-wife, played by Kate Jennings Grant, who, man,
Hilarious.
I could tell
Amazing.
up and down the, like, brevity of her theater experience.
Brevity means, so the length, extent. Brevity means short.
Oh, really?
Yes.
My bad. The exact opposite of what I just said. I could tell how capable or how experienced of a theatrical actor that she was. She was good. I really liked what she did.
Some of my favorite moments were from her.
Yeah.
She's so good.
Then we have Timber Beaumont, who was our florist. He was a florist of Sebastian Sinclair's restaurants and events that Sebastian had catered, played by Michael Serrato.
Michael.
I want to find a way
So
to weasel
amazing.
in the line that we were talking about. I can't do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let me just say there's one particular line that was written in this script that Michael put his own unique flair on that, like, was objectively the correct creative choice to make in a theatrical production like that, like, I will forever hold as one of my favorite moments of that entire weekend. I think, yeah, Emma's probably right here in having me not say the specific line because, whatever, you had to be there. But also, just...
Michael saved the day in the end, and
Yes.
really just it just so endearing. Guests loved him.
What a
Yeah.
shining light. Then we had Chef Kren, who was Chef Dominique Kren, Michelin chef, I believe also host of some Food Network shows back in the day, who played herself in this experience. Again, her and her team crafted, created, cooked the food that was front and center this experience. And she got to be a part of the story. I didn't get to meet her very much other than, like, maybe right before no, she was part of a table read. But anyways, first of all, the food. Wow.
Oh my God.
If we're just to talk about the
Amazing.
food, goddamn, there was no question that food should have been front and center at the heart of this experience.
Also shouting out her assistant, Max, who was a huge part of this as well.
Yes.
He was really great at especially coordinating at the end between us and him and the various teams.
He was also a great guest. He played along sometimes, like trying to like actually solve, like understand this story. And that was really fun. I got to meet him as a guest first before I knew that he was Chef Kren's assistant. And then last but not least, Charlie Carr.
Who was that?
Sebastian Sinclair's driver, played by yours truly. I got the chance kind of last minute. And I don't think it's necessarily important to explain the whys of how I ended up becoming an actor in this thing, but it was not initially intended that I was going to be acting in this thing until it was. And then once it was like, I think I'm Charlie. Mm-hmm. Like there was a moment in the writing, like toward the end, where when we found out that I was going to be a character, it was like, well, you know, I might not be this character, but if you were to be any of these characters, who do you think that you'd be? And I really resonated with Charlie. And all I really got to say on that is that, like, wow, what an experience to be on a call sheet with Neil Patrick Harris and David Burtka. That again, with all these talented actors being as incredible as they were, again, just only knowing these two names going into it, I got to act in something with them, and that's all I'll really say on that. That was a wild experience. I had a lot of fun doing it. It added to the overwhelming nature of being there that weekend. But yeah, that was really cool. So that was the cast.
I have some other quick shout outs here.
Yes, please.
So the Constructed Adventures team, Chris, of course, who we've continued to talk about, just an absolute powerhouse and a backbone of this whole thing. His puzzle team, Cassidy, Ryan, and other Chris, absolutely fantastic work there. And then on site, he had Katie and Jordan joining for some production assistant help, and they also could not have done that without them.
And Caitlin.
Was Caitlin with Ryan?
Oh, she may have been.
Sure.
Okay, but those are names coming up.
Yes.
Okay,
so then also to shout out...
well, just let's talk on them real fast. Katie and Jordan, just like helping the event flow was like one of the things that they were primarily tasked with. Of course, there was like specific things within that, but like they were integral to that story, and they were very fun to work with. It sort of bums me out that we only had like a very short experience with these people, because like it felt like, again, I'm just speaking subjectively here, it felt like we were like of the same ilk there, you know what I'm saying? In that like we were all like kind of like, I'm going to say the word starstruck, that like they're all capable, talented, competent people, but like, you know, while the actors were doing their acting thing, it was us working on the thing behind the scenes. And like, that just felt, you know, there was some camaraderie there.
There was. There was certainly camaraderie. Absolutely. So some other shout outs here from the Cajou team, I believe, Ryan and Caitlin, who were, again, logistics champions. There were so many times I was finding Ryan asking about different details, if we can make XYZ happen. And he... again, could not have been more delightful to work with. Caitlin, I know you worked with a lot as well, and she was fantastic. Everybody just was so flexible and excited and compassionate. And then last but not least, shouting out the Canyon Ranch staff. I know Jen and Mindy were
Jen and Mindy, those are the names I was looking for.
There was, oh my goodness, there's another couple of faces who I can't remember.
I'm looking up one of them now.
I want to say Cynthia, maybe.
That could certainly be it. Again, to anybody who's listening who was a part of this thing, I do want to reiterate that like this was all an underslept blur for us, and I just so I apologize to anybody whose names we're forgetting, who we are not shouting out in this moment. You are all amazing people to work with.
It took an army to make it happen.
Yes. Where the heck is she? Oh no. Cynthia. That's the name that I'm looking for. I believe that she was with Canyon Ranch.
Yes, she was amazing.
There was a couple of point people from Canyon Ranch specifically that we were like deferring to, asking if we could like, you know, there was this particular moment, or there's this particular part of the story where like, you know, my character would like take people through the tunnels of Canyon Ranch that they were like so down to like give us tours of and like give us like suggestions on like you should take them here. This is a really cool spot. Again, every name that we're shouting out here was like a big part of helping the story unfold. But like, I was so blown away with how, what's the word I'm looking for? Not accommodating the Canyon Ranch staff was. Anything we needed, they were there for. All the way from like a secret entrance into the building from the tunnels to, oh my God, we need a label maker. Where is that?
Oh my gosh,
help us find
that was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you to the cast and crew. Thank you to the team at Canyon Ranch, Cajou, Constructed Adventures, all of the actors, Capital One.
Oh gosh, yep.
Shit, man. What else we got? Okay, then, knowing full well that there's names, companies, businesses, teams that we probably forgot, I'll now just pivot into the final. Well, what time is it? What are we looking at?
I have to leave in 5 minutes.
She's got to leave in 5 minutes. So I'll just pivot here to say, if you haven't, go to catandcrew.com. That's KATANDCREW.com. Enter the promo code MONDAY. That's MUNDAY for 10% off your first purchase. You've already seen a mid-roll ad. You know what they do. Katie and Andrew, phenomenal people. Huge supporters. I love them so much. And then check out Peach Rings by Midwest Skies, the music video featuring Emma Sheridan, and stream it. Gotta get those numbers up, man. Come on, brother. Anything you'd like to shout out?
You can follow me at Firefly Tapestry for my creative work.
Yep. Let's see. What other things should we shout out here? Again, just to reiterate, check out Chris at Constructed Adventures. This would not have been possible without him.
Absolutely.
Spay and neuter your pets. Thank you, Emma. We freaking did it, bro. Love you guys. I don't think there will be an episode. No, there will be an episode next week. Well, you know what? I'll see you next time. Check out the upcoming end of fall / early winter schedule for Midwest Skies. We've got Cadillac, Michigan coming up the day before Thanksgiving for the biggest bar night of the year. Then we're going to be in Bay City on November 30th. Then December 14th is our Christmas show at Turnstiles in Grand Rapids. Then until like April or so, I don't got anything going on with Midwest Skies. That is also going to be the next time that we work on an immersive experience. Frig, man. Thank you for listening. This has been the A.D.H. Deep Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David Mund. This is Emma Sheridan. Timber is definitely not a big fat dog. He's just big boned. Love you guys. I'll see you